Well, here I am at my new podcasting station in the new house, and it's, I gotta say, it's a lot more comfortable than the old house was. I've got it set up in a better way.
Yeah, you've come into the 21st century in your new dwelling there.
Yeah, I guess it comes with experience, too, to set this up this way. It looks good. It's also on the second floor so that when guests come over, they don't have to see what a nerd I am, you know.
And you got the internet hooked up just in time for this episode.
Yeah, that's another thing. The internet got hooked up 2 hours before recording, so this is the first thing I'm doing on the internet.
Oh,
since
cutting it close.
I was wondering if we were actually going to record this tonight, but, you know, it looks like we are. Well, we are. Yeah, here we go. The problem is, like, I have my whole CD collection on the first floor, so anybody that walks in is just going to walk right out thinking I'm a lunatic. So there you go.
Well, last week we did a face-to-face in the mountain lair. Now we're back to our usual tactics here for episode 205 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind, bringing you 6 new releases every week centered around the classical and jazz genres. I'm your co-host, Russ.
And I'm your co-host, Mike.
Before we get into things this week, I'm going to send out a few thanks. First of all, to Azure Sky Records.
Yeah. They wrote to us twice. I actually commented on what they wrote twice. It was really nice of them to reach out and just say thank you to us. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. And they also shared our episode on Facebook that featured Stanford Chung's Folios of Light.
Yeah.
It was an interesting recording, some fine piano performances of Japanese composers' works.
Yeah, a little unusual. I thought, we live in Japan. We want people to hear more music that was composed in Japan, and this was some pretty popular music, so I was kind of happy to put that out there. Those smaller labels like Azure Sky, we do a few labels that are sort of local, but I guess they're big enough that they're not really going to write back to us. So, But thanks, Azure Sky, for reaching out. We really enjoyed that.
And we're going to hear some more Japanese composers' works in the program tonight.
We are.
And, well, I'm giving out thanks. We also want to thank Right Tempo Records in Italy and the owner, Rocco Pandiani, for sharing last week's episode in which we discussed saxophonist Emanuele Cisi's Russian, a great post-bop recording of satisfying jazz from Italy. So be sure to check that one out. I really like that. I keep listening to it.
I liked it too. Yeah, it's kind of a little old school and just great, like, melodizing. They have such great ideas over there in Italy. I don't know.
I've got some more Italian jazz coming up next week, which I'll tell you about if you stick around to the end of the episode. But before we get into this week's music, I want to remind everyone that in the episode description, you'll find links to Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music for all of the recordings that we'll discuss. And at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. If you can't see the full episode description or the recording list and links are hard to access wherever you're listening to us, just come over and check us out on our host site, Podbean, podbean.com. Everything is easy to follow there. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe wherever you like listening to us, and tell a music-loving friend. If you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a short review, that also helps us get listed in the music categories of the podcasts, and that helps us grow our audience. Come over and follow us on Facebook as well. We've got a page there. You can get extra info and more new release information during the week. You can leave a message or comment there, and you can check us out on X too. Our ID there is Adult Music Pod. I post links to the episodes there. And if you want to contact us directly with any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, at gmail.com. We're going to play music samples in this episode as usual. This is our fair use disclaimer. Music sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available on streaming services in the links provided. We also suggest that if you enjoy the music, you consider purchasing the CDs or high-quality downloads to support the artists.
Now, jumping right in.
Yeah.
Our first classical record today is some Italian music. Speaking of Italians, this is called Sono Regina e Sono Amante, Piccini Italiano e Piccini Francese. It's an album of works by Niccolò Piccini, both in Italian and French, and the soprano here is Rosa Feola, and she's accompanied by Cappella Neapolitana, conducted by Antonio Florio, who I'm a little familiar with. She, however, is a new singer for me. This is on the Pentatone label, and it was released March 14th, so not so long ago. Okay, so Niccolò Piccini, 1728 to 1800. So we got to think about that. He lived the entire lifetime of Mozart. He was born before him, and he died at around the time Beethoven was getting ready to write the Moonlight Sonata. So he was already maybe 12 piano sonatas into his career. That's how I got to think about these people. He's kind of like Pergolesi in that he's kind of between the Baroque and classical. He's kind of more classical, I think, but you do hear harpsichord in there. So he's sort of still drawing from the Baroque. His name may be forgotten today, or up to this point, but his opera La Cecchina, or La Buona Figliola, was the most performed opera of the 18th century, the century he lived in. Who knew? I didn't know that either. I would have thought, maybe something by Mozart, but no. Oddly, the program on this album avoids any music from that opera entirely. Why?
Of course.
Because they wanted to go for the less well-known works. Well, we don't know this work either. I mean, this is a virtually unknown composer. Anyway, Piccini's pretty interesting. He was inspired by his wife, Vincenza Sibilla, who was a singer. Kind of like Verdi was inspired by his wife, who was also a soprano, except that she was a professional soprano. Piccini married Sibilla when he was 28 and she was 14.
Oops.
Well, that was pretty normal back then, Women had they had to get married and have children then. And they had 7 children. Wow. So she was pretty busy during her life. Sibilla was a singer but never sang on the stage, only at private gatherings. And word was that she had a beautiful and captivating voice. Piccini said his wife interpreted his works with more feeling, expression, perfection, and artistry than anyone else. Now, you wouldn't want, in this era, like women of high standing to be on the opera stage. It was kind of like let's say, a loose woman's career, let's say. That sort of, it didn't change. Women just kind of became less respectable, I guess, in the 19th century. Well, now all the women are going to send me hate mail. Anyway. Piccini's career started in Naples and moved to Rome and then Paris in the later years of his life. Piccini's music was in 3 main areas: the comic opera in Neapolitan language. We're going to hear one of those works here. We will hear other comic works too. The serious and sentimental Italian opera and the French tragédie lyrique. This album is the first in an artistic and scholarly project dedicated to composers around Mozart. So, as I mentioned, Piccini was alive during Mozart's time. The booklet note makes the lofty claim that the extraordinary voice of Rosa Feola can well evoke the qualities of Vincenza Sibilla. But how can you possibly know that? There are no recordings of Vincenza Sibilla. There's a rather severe-looking photo of Feola in the booklet just after the track listing, like she's warning us to like this album. I should mention that there seem to be blocks of texts missing between columns on pages 11 and 12 of the booklet. It could be that I just didn't notice them. The texts don't really continue into each other smoothly, so I don't know what was going on there. Anyway, we're here for the music. Opera in 18th century Italy were as widespread as movies were when Russ and I were growing up. When you went out, you went to the opera back then. That was the main mode of entertainment. All right, so let's get into this program. Arias from Piccini's operas. The first one is Didone Abbandonata, first performed in Rome in 1770. Act 1, Scene 5. Sono Regina e Sono Amante. This is the title track of the album. Aria of Didone. Now, Didone is Dido. She was Aeneas's honey until Aeneas left her to found Rome, and she was sort of all alone after having abandoned her family to be with him. So she didn't have a happy end. Anyway, a story like that makes for just great operatic arias, right? Because that's what they're all about. Extreme emotion. Right. And being abandoned is about as extreme as it comes. This opera was the peak of Piccini's Italian period in opera seria. Following a long-standing custom, all female roles in operas in Rome were sung by castrati, or falsettists. Mainly castrati, I would think. In this, the title track, Didone claims her freedom to be both queen and a woman, able to choose whom to love. And she chooses Aeneas. The opening stays unaggressive in its rhythm, gently introducing the vocalist. Feola comes in on a high note. She's a soprano, but this is a voice with some vocal color to it, even in the high end. It's not light for a soprano, and I rather like that, but she's agile enough in her vocal ornaments. The performance here is straightforward in approach, and I'll give you a sample of this some way in. Let's go to around the 3-minute, 15-second mark. Yeah, there's some vocal color to that voice, and I really like that.
Yeah.
It's a little unusual for a soprano, like a coloratura soprano they just have that really high voice, and you don't get that kind of weight to it. In the sample, which goes into a lot of ranges, you can hear the various hues Feola gets. I'm noticing that she doesn't quite get that imperious quality that the opening Son Regina should have. I mean, she's saying, I'm a queen, and you really should sound a bit imperious when you say that. But the very exposed vocal line shows her to have a complete vocal technique. There's an old-school ad-lib cadenza for the voice at the very end of the track. Track 2, La Capricciosa. Not the pizza, but the woman. This is from Rome, 1776. Act 1, Scene 12, Signora Padroncina, aria of Nanetta. Now, Nanetta, the maid of the protagonist, who is the noble Ernestina, who is ready to fall in love with anyone and is therefore considered capricious. Nanetta, the maid, asks her mistress if she can take one of her many suitors for herself. 3 will remain for you, she says. This is a more mischievous, lighter aria. It's a comic opera. The Cappella Neapolitana is very much an accompaniment here, not adding much expression to the well-formed melodic lines. Feola's voice lightens only a bit for this aria, not much of the coquette about it. Nice tone and phrasing throughout, though. I'm just missing characterization a bit. The character becomes more playful for the middle section, and I'd like to sample that. You know, why'd you hear those high notes? Sounds good. I like the accompaniment there, too. They had a bit of character. And I said they were sort of straightforward, but in this section, there's a bit of lightness and humor, and I really enjoyed that. Feola's expression comes from her feel for the rhythm here. She bounces along with the orchestra. That said, there can be a lot more playfulness for the characterization, too. Although this is enough, I think. I liked it enough. Track 3, Didon, Fontainebleau and Paris, 1783. Didon is Didonis, so this is Dido again, Aeneas' lover. Act 2, Scene 3, Ah, que je fus bien inspiré. This is in French. Puccini's most successful French opera was Didon. We've really heard Puccini's full range in these 3 tracks with this French aria now. Feola has a slightly heavier tone here, appropriate for the role and the language. She sounds at home singing in French, as she did in Italian in the previous 2 tracks. I want to hear some of her tone up high here, so let's go for that. That voice has equal quality in all of the ranges and goes through them all very smoothly. It's a great legato that she has as well. Track 4, Zenobia, Naples, 1756. This is the Sinfonia, so no singing on this track. The Cappella Neapolitana and Antonio Florio are put in the spotlight. Rhythmically, they step out more at the opening here than they did in the previous 3 tracks, so they really are, backing off when Feola is singing, and now here we hear them playing an instrumental track. It's nothing like we get from someone like Giovanni Antonini, but it's got a soft, contoured, rhythmic life to it. Let's hear a bit from the beginning. Yeah, it's got like a sprightly feeling to it. I like it. There's a middle section after a long pause, the andantino on mezza voce. So this is really a 3-movement sort of track. It's got an appealing creeping rhythm in the quarter note bass accompaniment as the strings carry the melody. Good expression here, subtly played. There's another pause followed by a third movement allegro, completely different from the opening, so it's like a third movement. It's very brief. Track 5, Ciro Riconosciuto, Naples 1759, Act 1, Scene 5, Ognor tu fosti, aria of Ciro, the main character. The aria is a tender expression of affection for the adoptive father, the shepherd Mitridate. The orchestra plays with sensitivity. Feola comes in at 35 seconds with the vocal. Her sensitivity comes from pushing certain vowels further than others. A nice little trick. Let's hear a bit of that. That last line is impressively smooth. It's a traditional way of expressing emotion while maintaining full tone. Feola is old school, not a bad thing. The voice brightens for the middle section, in which the text communicates the character's respect. There's a subtly taken cadenza at the end that I particularly enjoyed here. Nice characterization in this entire aria. Track 6, Artaserse, Naples 1768, Act 3, Scene 5, Mi credi spietata, aria of Mandane. This was written for the Teatro San Carlo in Naples in 1768. The aria underscores the emotional contradiction of the character for Mandane, who loves Arbace, thought to be dead by his sister Samira, just before the drama finds its happy ending. Get out a piece of paper and work that out. There's a bit of dotted rhythm feel to the accompaniment. Again, the expression is in the technique, not the tone of the vocal. Let's hear a bit of this. You can hear the expression in the tenderness of the slowing of the vocal line just before its pregnant pause between lines in the sample. That said, I could have used more passion in the middle section, in the verse, that hatred, that anger of a disdainful soul, ungrateful Samira, I can endure no more. It sounds like she can endure more. I'd like to hear, that I'm at the end of my rope kind of, tone in the voice. There's a good high note on the return of the opening verse at around the 4-minute and 40-second mark. Track 7, La Schiava, means the slave. Rome, 1776. Andante con moto. This is an instrumental track. It's played lightly, allowing the themes and orchestration to speak for themselves, and speak they do. The light-toned approach helps a lot. The piece has an ABA form. I'll leave you to sample that on your own. Track 8, Le Faux Lord, Fontainebleau, 1783, Act 1, Scene 7, Aux Nuits Déesse du Mystère. This is French aria of Irène. The orchestra plays a slow, ghostly line with a gently floating rhythm, which is appropriate for the text, which is, O night, goddess of mystery, sweet companion of love. Let's hear a bit of that. We'll hear that line sung in French right here. Feola gets the same full-tone sound that she gets when she sings in Italian, which I find amazing. Italian is really made for those really powerful notes because you get to push off on the consonants. Usually those soft consonants change the vocal tone. She gets some power into her high note at around the 4-minute and 20-second mark as well. Track 9, Le Donne Vendicate, Rome, 1763. This is the overture, and it represents Puccini's Roman period. It's an instrumental. It's got an upbeat, cheerful feel to it. The bassoon covers much of the bass with a droning tone, which caught my ear in an appealing way and made me want to sample this track because I love hearing instruments like the bassoon, especially in this era when you don't really hear them stick out too much. Let's hear a bit of that. It just sounds like he's playing bass, but the player gives it a lot of character. Just the limited melody that he has there gets a bit of character. At 2 minutes and 20 seconds, there's a long pause, after which a new section starts, quieter and more circumspect. Another pause, and at 4 minutes and 25 seconds, we hear a livelier, more dancey section. The dance rhythm only lightly accented, but enough to give you a solid sense of the downbeat, and the third section is very brief. Track 10, Addis, from Paris, or I guess it would be Atis in French. Paris, 1780, Act 2, Scene 8, Tremblay ingrate de Maître Hir, aria of Cybele. It's a French aria, and one that requires a lot of imperiousness from the vocalist, and a lot more than we're getting here. I mean, the first line is, Tremble, ungrateful, for betraying me. I know how to hate the ones I love. And Feola instead produces beauty of line and tone. She gets some powerful high notes at the end of phrases, though. There's a kind of haze around her tone that stops it from being severe and cutting. She gets most of her expression out of her powerful high notes, though even these are restrained. It's a highly musical performance. I don't want to complain about it, but this really needed more emotion. And it is in French, and I know that it's a softer language, but still. It's a great performance musically, though. Track 11, Il Finto Turco, or the fake Turk, or the make-believe Turk. Naples, 1762. Andantino Cantabile. This evokes the Neapolitan comedy scene. It's an instrumental track featuring the Cappella Neapolitana. The music is gentle, with a quiet, lightly orchestrated melodic line. Once it gets going, it's got a light rhythmic drive to it. It's a pleasant, brief work. And finally, track 12, probably the most interesting track on the album, and the one that, to me, Rosa Feola sounded most at home in. Lo Stravagante, from Naples in 1761. Act 1, Scene 5, I don't even know how to say this. Maio Pela Capo, which is Neapolitan dialect. It's an aria of Lisetta, and it's sung in Neapolitan. This is a Neapolitan comedy. The note says we don't know the original Neapolitan farce from which this was taken, though we have Lo Stravagante as the title. I'm not really sure why. The text refers to a woman of low social standing who has sacrificed everything for her beloved, caring for him and soothing him in difficult times. And this ungrateful man's jealousy eventually reaches a point making her lose her patience. And you don't want to do that to a Neapolitan woman, let me tell you. This is the only Neapolitan piece we have on the album. The music has a light, swooping quality to it, as though it were wound up via a spring. I'd like to hear this. It's really charming. Feola adds a few expressive qualities to her line, hitting certain syllables hard to give an insistent quality. I like this performance the best of all on the recording. Feola sounds very at home in this Neapolitan piece. The booklet, by the way, gives the sung Neapolitan text along with an Italian translation added to the English translation, which I also really appreciated. This album really is a calling card for Rosa Feola's vocal quality and range. She's in the spotlight for the most part, the Cappella Neapolitana taking a back seat in accompanying. The performances don't go out of their way to differentiate the expression between different characters, but within individual arias there is certainly emotional contrast, however subtle it may sometimes appear. Feola's vocal quality itself is appealing, with its heavier tone in the high range being a bit unique among sopranos. The tone is sort of veiled, with a soft, diffuse edge to it. She's really not a dramatic singer, though she's perfectly fine in dramatic arias. I thought she could have stepped out more in her characterization of the individual characters, but I was happy enough to hear the steady, sure tone and immaculate technique of the voice itself. The performances go for beauty over excitement, and I have no issue with that. The music of Niccolò Piccini is little known, and the arias on this program even littler known, so if you're interested in the period, there's lots to discover here.
Reading about Piccini, it seems he's mostly remembered for his comic opera, but there really is a wide range of musical expression in these pieces in this program. Feola draws out the contrasts throughout the program here. I was ready to hide the wine glasses after the first track. You didn't sample the ultimate high note, but then the program turns more subtle in spots, and I enjoyed the music and the performance by Cappella Neapolitana a lot. Feola has a powerful voice, but also more subtle phrasing and nice interpretation throughout. It's quite enjoyable.
Yeah, beautiful legato singing as well. That smooth tone, even between ranges, really great. The transitions are fantastic. Okay, we're in Ravel's anniversary year, the 150th anniversary of his birth. And we just did a Ravel album, I believe, last time, wasn't it? Or is it 2 weeks ago? And we're doing another one, but not really. This one's a little unusual. This is by a pianist that we really love, Bertrand Chamayou. We last heard him doing those wonderful Satie works along with the works by John Cage. And then we heard a full John Cage album by him. And now we have an album that isn't really a straightforward Ravel album. It's called Ravel Fragments. This was released on the Erato label on March 7th. Now, Chamayou recorded Ravel's complete solo piano works in 2015, so 10 years ago. And I have that recording on my shelf. Now sitting on the shelf prominently, which is very nice. I've finally gotten all those CDs out of the boxes. This particular album is called Fragments because it contains no truly original work by Ravel. We do have 3 fragments of his ballet Daphnis et Chloé that Ravel made transcriptions of, and they're included here. The single piano version of La Valse isn't fully figured, and the pianist has to put it together as a sort of puzzle. It leaves out a lot of harmonies that make the orchestral score and 2 piano versions so great. Chamayou considers this album, which also includes tributes to Ravel by other composers, as his modest contribution to the 150th anniversary celebrations of Maurice Ravel and his music. So let's start. The first track is a little bit of a surprise. By Ravel, Trois beaux oiseaux du paradis, from his Trois chansons. So it's a song, and here we're just hearing the piano with the piano playing the vocal part as well. It starts softly, and the harmony has that Ravel magic. It's a fully formed song, but we're missing the vocal here. The vocal line is played by the piano. Let's hear it. It's really beautiful and came as a little bit of a surprise to me because I've never heard it played like this before. Ravel really knows how to enchant.
Yeah, and that's quite a touch there, too. Really beautiful playing.
We love Chamayou for that, and that's why we love the Settee record so much, because he just played it so gently like that. Chamayou reminds us of the sensitive touch that made his album of Ravel's complete solo piano works, and as I said, the Settee album, so compelling. The song has a languid, late-night quality to it. Track 2, Ravel again, Danse légère et gracieuse de Daphnis. It's nice to hear this in a version that isn't orchestrated. You'll recognize the theme if you know the ballet score. And this particular part works well on the piano. Now, when you don't hear it orchestrated, because you have those great colors, that Ravel was just a great orchestrator. But here you're hearing the naked harmony, and they're equally as magical. They really stand out. Let's hear the opening of this. And I'm sure you'll recognize it if you know the ballet. It's one of the more famous themes. Yeah, and then some of the piano figuration begins there.
Yeah.
It's already pretty magical here. And then when he dresses it up with that orchestration, it's really just one of the great reasons to be alive, to hear the Daphnis et Chloé ballet. The harmonies sound more strongly, and some of the figuration makes this piece seem eminently suitable for the piano. Track 3, we get a composer who's giving a tribute to Ravel. This is Joaquin Nin, Mensaje a Ravel from Cadena de Vals. Nin was a Spanish composer. He was the father of the writer Anais Nin. This is a quick-moving piece that has a creeping quality to its opening. The harmonies bloom at around the 40-second mark with a sort of gruffness to the attack. Let's start from there. There's a lot of variety in this piece. There's a real Spanish quality to that rhythm, and that's in keeping with Ravel's music. Ravel wrote a lot of, Spanish-themed pieces as well. This piece is in ABA form, and we hear the opening repeat after the brief middle section. Track 4, back to Ravel, Chanson de la Mariée from Cinq Mélodies Populaires Grecques. I love these songs, and this one in particular, the song of the wife, or the woman who's engaged, I guess. Again, this is a piano transcription of a voice and piano version. All of the magical piano figuration is there, but I've got to say I prefer this one with the voice. It's pretty great here, though, and it's a piece I'd like to play. It's really magical. Let's hear a little bit of this. Yeah, just get a good voice with this, and Chamayou would be a great accompanist for this. Track 5, Salvatore Sciarrino. He's a contemporary composer. This is a piece called De la Nuit, and that should remind us of Ravel's piece Gaspard de la Nuit. Sciarrino's homage features rapid figuration that recalls Scarbo from Gaspard de la Nuit, and there's a bit of Ondine in there in some of the harmony and pauses, which is the first movement of Gaspard. I guess the title gives the source of inspiration away. The piece demands razor-sharp articulation and very quick, light-fingered speed, and we get that from Chamayou here. Let's hear a bit of this as well. Yeah, some sudden rolls from the bass end of the piano make this kind of magical. The piece goes on for 6 minutes, and there are flashes of quotations from both of the works serving as the source of inspiration. The piece ends with a direct quote of the opening figuration of Ondine, in fact. Track 6, Fragments Symphoniques de Daphnis et Chloé. The ballet again. This is the nocturne, interlude, and then danse guerrière. Surprisingly, this seems Ondine-like as well in this setting. I am, of course, familiar with the orchestral setting of this work. It's the part of the ballet where Chloé is kidnapped by pirates. It takes on a different quality on the piano. Ravel's haunting orchestration gives the music a lot of extra character. Here we just get the themes and harmony, of course. At 3 minutes and 44 seconds, there's a brief, spacious, chord-based interlude, and then we burst into the second tableau, Pirate's Dance, after a swirling figuration. The playing here by Chamayou is powerful and impressive, but again, this really needs the orchestration for the full effect. You recognize certain elements of the thematic material. I should say the recording is full sounding, especially in the bass, and that's been the case throughout the recording so far, and will be all the way to the end. And it has great balance throughout the keyboard's range. The recording is really spectacular for a piano recording, especially with the quick figuration at the end, played with power by Chamayou here. This is a longish track at 10 minutes, but since we've already heard a Daphnis sample, I'll leave you to sample this one on your own. Track 7, Alexandre Tanzmann, Prelude No. 5, Hommage à Maurice Ravel. Tanzmann uses Ravel's and possibly Debussy's magical way with harmony to pay tribute. You can hear a fragment of a Ravel melody in there. Let's hear it. It picks up a bit as it goes, and then ends quietly. Track 8, Ravel, Pièce en forme de habanera. This well-known piece is usually, I believe, for violin and piano. Here it's transcribed for solo piano, and it works well. Chamayou draws out the Spanish element in his phrasing of the melody. Track 9, Frédéric Durieux. Born in 1959, he's a contemporary composer. Pour tous ceux qui tombent, hommage à Maurice Ravel. The title means For All Those Who Fall. Touye is a contemporary composer, and his homage seems to be based on the movement of Gaspard de la Nuit that we haven't heard from yet, the second movement, Le Gibet, or the Gibbet, with its repeating, eerie note. It depicts like a hanging body. Let's hear it from around the 1 minute mark. Amazing how much power he gets from the bass end of that piano. It sounds great on the recording. This piece begins very quietly and plays with extreme dynamics, as you heard, sudden jarring chords suddenly sounding out of the quiet texture. Track 10, Maurice Ravel, La Valse. This piece begins with rumbling in the low end of the piano, and the beginnings of the waltz's formation start sounding pretty quickly. They're in the forefront of the piano. We start hearing the full theme tentatively played by 1 minute and 30 seconds as the low-end roiling continues in the left hand. Chamayou gets a big full sound, nicely cushioned at tack 2, when he plays the waltz at its full fortissimo volume at around 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The sound is beautifully captured on the recording. In the 4th minute, Chamayou surprises with a sudden jarring fortissimo chord that then leads to further waltz themes. Chamayou helps the listener follow the piece via sudden changes of dynamic and rhythm. When sections change, there's a liveliness to his playing and a crisp articulation that keeps the listener's ear on the narrative. At the 9-minute mark, things are starting to break up in the waltz's form. A kind of mechanical menace creeps into the accompaniment as the waltz in the right hand nonchalantly goes on, building up to a cadence that it never reaches, because tragedy strikes. The accompaniment sounds like waves washing everything away. The ending is taken with more of an ear for articulation than for overpowering drama, but the drama does come across. This is really one of the better interpretations of the solo piano version of this work that I've heard. I'll leave you to sample it, though. I want to sample the less familiar works. Track 11, Ricardo Vignes, Menuet spectrale à la mémoire de Maurice Ravel. Vignes premiered some of Ravel's works, including Gaspard. He was a pianist for the most part. This is a light homage featuring a straightforward melody clothed in Ravel-like harmony. From the 1 minute mark, there's a staccato theme that irons itself out in its second half. Yeah, sweet. Track 12, Xavier Montsalvage. Elegia à Maurice Ravel. Montsalvage was Cuban. Chamayou has a very light touch here and has the damper pedal way down. The harmony and sustain give the piece a haunting quality. Let's hear a little bit of that. There's something a little off-kilter about Montsalvage's harmony, isn't there?
Yeah.
The middle of the piece sounds more improvisatory as the harmony wanders, as if searching. Track 13, Betsy Jolas, born 1926. She's still alive. Yeah, she's 98 years old, currently living in France.
Wow.
Born in Paris, and her mother is an American translator, or was. This is called Signé, Hommage à Ravel. This starts with a very quiet tone from Chamayou on a two-note pattern high up in the piano's range, setting a rhythm. The rest of the material plays against it. The piece has some quick repeated chords that appear for emphasis every once in a while. Listen to the power of the bass note at 1 minute and 30 seconds. This is a fantastic recording in that way. The middle section gets more harmonically abstract. I'm not going to sample that bass note, but I'm going to sample the more harmonically abstract section. This is from the 2-minute mark on. Those repeated notes kind of make me think of woodpeckers. As we heard at the end of the sample, repeated note patterns come back. The piece ends as a sustained forte note is allowed to decay. Track 14, Arthur Honegger, Hommage à Ravel from Trois Pièces. Honegger's homage is, as you would predict, very pretty, with a soft, gauzy attack. Maybe the una corda pedal is being used, the left-hand pedal, or the pedal all the way on the left. And Ravelian harmonies that Honegger himself often used are in the piece. This actually has a bit of a Debussy quality to the harmony and overall approach as well. It actually reminds me most of the prelude from Ravel's Le Tombeau de Couperin as far as harmony goes. When Chamayou is in the low end of the piano at 1 minute and 50 seconds or so, he gets such a clear, focused sound that you can feel it as well as hear it. Such is its presence. Let's hear this from the opening. A little bit of a Spanish rhythm there at the very end as well. I like the tone that Chamayou got high up on the piano at the end as well. The piece has a sudden resolve to a major chord that's very characteristic of Ravel. Track 15, the final track, another scene from Daphnis et Chloé by Ravel. The theme's from the third tableau of the ballet and is a gentler section, which, if I recall, features the couple dancing together, reenacting the story of Pan and Syrinx. It's gently and affectionately played on the piano by Chamayou, who really gives this a magical quality. I noticed that in the program on this album, the Daphnis and Chloé fragments are given in the order they're heard in the ballet, and we get a section from each of its 3 tableaux. The melody here is enchanting enough to maintain interest, not to mention the intoxicating harmony. There's some excitable figuration in the 3rd minute. There's a great arpeggiated fountain effect at the end, and the piece and album end on a gently taken chord. Chamayou here presents an inventive program with intoxicating playing. He's very much among my favorite pianists at the moment, and seems to be in that zone where he's playing with a heightened ability to put the music across. The recording is spectacular as well, capturing Chamayou's sound with both clarity and presence. The piano's sound is miraculous. The program itself can seem a bit incomplete, probably part of the reason it's called Ravel Fragments, but it offers so many delights that it'll be hard not to return for additional listens. Although the program is a bit unusual, the album itself is a winner all around due to Chamayou's absolute dedication to the music and the concept.
Yeah, Chamayou makes these sound like a lot more than fragments, and I think that's because of his passion and real flair for Ravel that comes through with the amazing technique, touch, and dynamics I found the dedication and homage pieces by other composers interesting as well, and sometimes surprising, such as the Honegger. It seemed really different from the pieces I know of his regular compositions. And just as with all of Chamayou's records, everything he records is worth hearing, and it's always a real treat for the ears, so this was kind of special as well.
Okay, our third classical album of the night is called Chasm, and it's by a Japanese pianist, Maiko Mori, on the Orchid Classics label, and this was released on February 21st. Now, I was kind of sitting on this one for a while because I wanted to get the Azure Sky record in too, so I did that one first. And now I got to this one too. More Japanese composers to come. But first, tracks 1 through 8, we hear music by Nikolai Kapustin.
Yeah.
One of our favorite jazzy Ukrainian composers. He's born in the Soviet Union in what is now Ukraine. And he lived 1937 to 2020. And these are his 8 concert etudes opus 40. Now, early 20th century American jazz found an unlikely audience in the USSR. How it managed to survive in such a restrictive artistic environment is something I'd like to know more about. This is a music book I'd really like to read, like Jazz in the Soviet Union, because the authorities couldn't have liked it. It was sort of rebellious music. It wouldn't be something that they would allow. And I'm just kind of wondering how it got in and, how it had such an influence. We shouldn't mistake Kapustin's music for jazz, though. It's a fusion of the jazz idiom and the forms and performance practices of classical music. It's all precisely notated for concert pianists. If the pianist is good enough, though, he'll make it sound like it's being improvised. When Western classical pianists discovered Kapustin's music in the late 1990s, these works were among the first to reach a wider audience. And we hear all 8 of them on this album. The first one is called Prelude. It starts out with a jazzy rhythm, and Mori shows herself to have a good sense of that. Now, one of the issues I have with classical pianists playing music like this is that they tend to rush through it, not allowing it to breathe. When music swings in jazz, there's a kind of like spaciousness to it. There's this breathing room. And classical pianists tend to take this as an opportunity to show off virtuosity, and it doesn't really work for the rhythm well. Mori, in this case, sort of falls between that and giving the music room to be heard, so she's sort of in the middle of the two. It's a really good performance, but could have been a bit slower, I thought. It is called an etude, so you naturally want to play it fast. And it registers well, though. Mori gets a lot of detail across, and there's a lot of detail in this piece. It's pretty surprising. There's an impressive run at the very end. Let's hear a sample right from the beginning of this piece. And all those quick changes in the balancing of the different voices is really impressive here. Also, the phrasing is fantastic as well. Track 2, number 2, Reverie. This could almost be a prelude or étude tableau by Rachmaninoff. Mori gives this a ghostly sound, playing with a light touch and a floating sense of the rhythm. The entire piece sounds like one rippling fabric. Let's hear the opening. Once we get to the B section, we get fast, jazzy lines like we heard in the first etude. And again, I feel like this could be slower, so we can get more of the detail and jazz feel. That said, there's plenty of detail put across here. Mori is really a great player. She can balance the voices really well and really make sure you hear all the detail. The ending is played with a bit of a hush to it, and the technique all comes across. Number 3, Toccatina. This has an aggressive rhythm to it. I like the tempo here. It's very fast, but appropriately so. The piece employs repeated notes throughout. They're kind of the identifying linking part over the more thematic material. The jazzy elements are well put across. They appear toward the end of the track. Let's sample the last 45 seconds. I thought this was very exciting, actually. Track 4, Etude 4, Remembrance. We get a bit of a respite here. There are rippling patterns played rapidly, but the overall tempo is on the slow side. The figuration sounds complicated, and Mori plays it all clearly, articulating phrases so you can follow their shape, even at this speed. Mori has a smooth, completely put together technique. All of the parts interlock. The middle section moves the figuration into the left hand and the lower end of the piano, while the right hand plays the chords. The ending section comes across with more romanticism due to the lightness of the figuration. Track 5, Etude 5, Raillery, brings to mind Prokofiev's wartime piano music. It has a stomping quality in the staccato bass line, and the right-hand piano chords are hammered out. You soon notice that there's a bluesiness in the sound and rhythm, so again, Kapustin is putting jazz elements in.
Basically a 12-bar blues.
Yeah, except that it's played in that weird Prokofiev style. Mori switches between jazz rhythms in the piece from slower bluesiness to boogie-woogie.
Yeah.
And she's got the feel down. This was a fun piece to listen to and sounds fearsome to play. The speeds here are ideal. Track 6, Etude 6, Pastoral. The right hand plays a circling staccato pattern with certain accented notes presenting a repeated thematic line. Despite the title, there are plenty of jazz elements in the rhythm and bluesy scales. I like the way Mori lightens her touch toward the end of the first minute, getting the listener to pay closer attention. Some judicial use of the damper pedal at the end causes an appealing smoothness to the final lines. Track 7, number 7, Intermezzo. The opening has a stride piano feel to it. It sounds old-timey and pretty straightforward as an early jazz piece. Mori has a few quick scale runs that show an amazingly even technique as she changes to the middle section in the first minute. Here she adds some etude-like technique to the opening jazzy theme. It sounds naughtier here in the second minute. The ending speeds up, sounding like an early jazz piece again, then goes back to the original stride tempo leading up to the end, and one final burst of speed for the finale. Again, let's hear the last 45 seconds of this piece because it was pretty spectacular. Crazy, man. And the final etude, number 8, Finale, this is track 8. There's some serious speed and multiple patterns sounding at the same time here. Mori does well to keep them all separated and individually audible. Her technique is immaculate and all lines sound cleanly and clearly. There are subtle changes to the rhythm and texture as the piece goes on, and Mori makes sure we hear them. an impressive performance of this entire set. All right, so we move on to another composer, Melanie Spanswick. She's a contemporary composer, born in 1969, a few years younger than me. This is her 2 etudes from Simply Driven from 2019. Spanswick blends classical music and elegance with minimalist textures, the notes say. Track 9, called Chasm, is the title track and is dedicated to Maiko Mori. After Kapustin, we still have the etude quality with this piece's sense of constant movement. In fact, the etude is really the whole theme of the album. Let's hear just a sample of this track. This is Chasm, the title track. And we have that etude quality and also the minimalist quality too, the repetitiveness. Pedal fills out the sound by the 36-second mark, which we heard at the tail end of that, and the theme reaches an ending as a bass note thunders out. After this, quarter note chords set the rhythm over a straightforward melody played as single notes, then octaves. This would be the more romantic element of Spanswick's music. The section ends, then we're back to the opening figuration again, so it's ABA. It's played with a lighter touch the second time and in a more staccato style, and then the piece ends quietly. Track 10 is Frenzy, and Spanswick calls this almost perpetual motion work a study for nimble fingers. The opening reminds me of the opening of Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto with its tolling bell effect. After this, a quick right-hand pattern begins as the left hand plays the melody, and I'm going to go up to that part and hear the melody. After this section ends, the hands switch as the right hand has the theme and the left plays the quick figuration. Tracks 11 through 13, Karen Tanaka, born 1961. She's a little older than me. These are her techno etudes, inspired by mid-80s club music. She's about that age, yeah, to be going to those clubs. The pieces translate to the piano a style which emerged simultaneously in West Germany and Detroit, USA. Now, when she says West Germany, I'm thinking of bands like Kraftwerk, I guess. In these techno etudes, Tanaka turns the keyboard into a driving, mechanistic dance floor, playing her pianist like a DJ's decks. Okay. This recording has been produced specifically with a drier, closer sound than the other tracks on the album, as requested by the composer. So she's going for that techno sound as close as she can get to it on the piano. Track 11 is the first etude. It has interesting patterns in the bass as the rhythm and low sound present a sort of galloping quality. There are lots of repeating patterns, as would be the case in techno music. Let's hear the opening. It sounds like these are studies in rhythm, and it sounds like there are some polyrhythms going on in there. This comes across as an etude or minimalist piece with its constant repeating patterns. The opening pattern sort of crossfades. The piano creates the effect into a new pattern highlighted by a quick two-note repeating pattern. A more complex repeating pattern dips into the bass end and comes in after that and brings the piece to a sudden end. Track 12 is Etude 2. It's very light and surprisingly slow at the opening. The bass suggests something more aggressive with its rhythm, but at the moment it's only fragmented. By about the 30-second mark, that rhythm becomes perpetual, and we hear a rising pattern in the right hand over it. The piece suddenly stops at the end. Track 13, Etude 3. A repeating two-note, 16th to dotted 8th note pattern keeps the techno rhythm at the beginning. The right hand starts playing other repeated patterns. Patterns keep subtly shifting in interesting ways. The overall feeling is of classical minimalism. The pattern suddenly stops at around 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and we hear the opening patterns again. And I'm going to sample it from that point at about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Yeah, well, if you grew up in the 1980s, I guess it's kind of appealing. I get it. The piece ends with this pattern suddenly stopping. Maiko Mori has an excellent feel for this music too, balancing the different patterns as in the Kapustin etudes to ensure that the listener hears all the lines clearly. Now, tracks 14 through 25 are a set of etudes by Masashi Hamauzu, born in 1971, another contemporary composer. These are his etudes opus 4. Now, Hamauzu was born in Germany, then moved with his family to Osaka in Japan in later childhood, and studied music at Tokyo University of the Arts. After he graduated, he left behind his aspirations to perform classical music and instead applied to work for video game publisher Square. There he composed music for many game titles, including the hugely popular Final Fantasy series. I guess that's the best way to get your music heard these days.
Maybe.
His style draws inspiration from Japanese composers such as Ryuichi Sakamoto, yeah, I could hear that, and is also influenced by Debussy and Ravel. All right, there are 12 of these. We're not going to hear all of them, so I'll sample these sort of here and there. Track 14 is number 1 in C major, Die Glocke, the piano as percussion. This has hammered effects, and the shape of the melodic contour is bell-like, as the title would suggest. It sounds like an etude, I have to say, with its perpetual motion feel. Track 15, number 2 in D major, it has a playful theme at the opening, and Hamauzu, I guess because he composed so much for video games, is really good at these playful themes. Let's hear this one. The accompaniment is fast, and Mori keeps it remarkably even and at an even dynamic. The middle of the piece has a bit more space and calms a bit at the minute and 20-second mark. A trill leads back to the opening theme. Track 16, number 3 in F-sharp major. A calm theme with fast arpeggio accompaniment. There are frequent rhythmic changes throughout the piece, which is still pretty brief at just under a minute and 30 seconds. Lots of ideas are heard in a small space. Track 17, number 4 in C major. This has a staccato hopping type theme for the opening. This one is playful too, like the second one, and I'm going to sample this one too. There's something almost like folk-like to these themes. You know, they kind of sound like those Bartok or Vaughan Williams folk songs from the early 20th century in a way. Track 18, number 5 in C major. Rippling rolled chords open the track along with a skipping rhythm. Chamayou's themes often have a playful, childhood-like sense to them, and this one's a bit like that. It gets a bit rhythmically broken up in the middle. Track 19 is number 6 in D minor, Blank. Blank is the nickname, I guess, for the piece. Chamayou spins a tender love song from a slow metronomic rhythm here. The theme itself is metronomically steady as well. This one is over 3 minutes long and is therefore much longer than the other etudes in this set up to this point. Let's sample this from about 50 seconds in. There's a pretty and rather surprising cadence at around the 2 minute and 15-second mark, after which a brief new section is heard. Then we're quickly back to the second theme, which I just sampled, and then back to the first. Track 20 is Etude 7 in B-flat major. It has rippling harp-like left-hand material. A melody is pulled out of the right-hand texture. The rhythm is interrupted by a spacious interlude. These two approaches continue to alternate throughout the piece. The last time we hear the opening, it's up high in the keyboard and played with an enjoyable hush, beautifully achieved by Maiko Mori on the piano. Track 21, number 8 in G minor, has a bell-like dancing rhythm to it. It sounds modal and Asian in its angularity of the theme. The pattern changes as new sections come in, but the percussive nature of the piece continues. The rhythm slows agreeably at one section and comes to an appealing close via a cadence at 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Then the opening rhythm and pattern return for the end. Track 22, number 9 in C minor, Donnergrollen. The title is the German word for a peal of thunder. The piece starts with a wandering theme in the bass end and then switches to the high end, with the bass providing distant, thunderous, ringing notes. The energy picks up at 1 minute and 30 seconds, and we get more of the Donnergrollen of the title. Track 23, number 10 in B-flat major, a staccato skipping feel to the theme. Again, it's a playful theme and immediately appealing for that reason. There are contrasting sections, but this keeps mostly to its staccato feel throughout. Track 24, number 11 in E-flat major, a quick pattern in the right hand while the bass end leaps along. Let's hear a bit of this one. So we heard the rippling harp-like arpeggio figures, and the piece keeps changing approach. A quick block chord section that we just heard follows, and comes to a full stop and a pause. After that, quickly rolled chords are heard in the bass, and the right hand plays melodic material. There are some explosive percussive chords reintroducing the opening material at the end. And finally, Etude number 12 in D-flat major, track 25, returns us to the bright ringing of the opening etude. It's staccato at the opening and slower than the opening work, with chords played in quick quarter notes. The piece pretty much keeps to this tempo and basic pattern, with other quicker patterns occasionally coming in. A deep bell-ringing set of chords comes in for the ending. And that's it. The program here is full-on technique for Maiko Mori, and I find myself wondering if she recorded it all in the same day. It turns out she did it in 2 days. That's still exhausting. It's a pretty exhausting listen if you're focusing on the technique, but the music is all more or less enjoyable, more particularly in the infectious Kapustin pieces, which Mori plays with excellent jazzy character. The program gets more challenging as it goes, but as you've heard via the samples, it's all listenable. Most of the program features etudes. Actually, I guess all of it does. The Spanswick works I would count as etudes as well. But they never sound technical in Mori's hands. It's a creative program featuring classical compositions that constantly reference other types of music and makes for an interesting listen.
First of all, fantastic playing by Maiko Mori. She has impressive technique and even makes some of the more study-like etudes sound very musical. The showpiece is the Kapustin, and she really gets his style, delivering the histrionic mood we've come to expect from his music. She pulls out the bluesy and boogie-woogie tinged segments with a lot of flair and at high speed. The Spanswick was interesting, but it's kind of hard to follow Kapustin. I might have put that first in the program.
I think Kapustin is always going to be hard to follow just because of how fun it is.
So I may have switched the order of those composers in my own mind. That would have been maybe a better segue. For the two Japanese composers, the Tanaka etudes sound very hard to play, but I got a little bit tired of their static rhythmic insistence, not being a fan of the music that inspired it too much. On the other hand, I really enjoyed the Hamauzu. There are interesting impressionistic tinged harmonies and a variety of expression with more lyrical passages balancing out percussive excitement. An interesting program overall with a lot of variety and a really fine performance. And speaking of variety, we've got a lot of it on the jazz side of the program, starting out with one of our favorite formats, the guitar organ trio, with Mr. Ron Magril, his recording Inspired on GleAM Records. It came out March 7th. Ron Magril was born in 1997. He's a guitarist and composer from Tel Aviv, Israel. He started playing music at a young age, with his classical violinist grandfather teaching him to play the violin. He then fell in love with the guitar, and he studied at Israel's top jazz schools. He was awarded a scholarship from the New School in New York in 2019, among other scholarships, and as you'll soon hear, his sound is inspired by the hard bop and post-bop sounds of the 1950s and 1960s. As a leader, he's recorded 2 albums. His debut album was Until Now on the British Ubuntu label. That was a quartet with piano, and here we've got, as I mentioned, one of our favorite formats, the organ trio. On this recording, Ron Magril on guitar and with all original compositions in the program, Jonathan Riklis on the Hammond organ, and Ofri Nehemia on drums. This was recorded at Pluto Studios in Tel Aviv. Sound engineer Jonathan Levy, mixed by Jonathan Levy as well, and mastered at Nilento Studio, sound engineer Lars Nilsson. The recording starts out with a tune called Playing for Wes Montgomery, that would be, of course, who would be an obvious influence on Magril's style. This tune is bursting with energy and driving swing. Nehemia's drums kick in a repeating 16-measure guitar melody, and then Magril launches full force into a solo. Let's check the start of this recording out. goes on bursting with ideas, but I like how he sticks on a lick sometimes to build up the tension. Riklis has nice punchy chords backing him up, and let's come back in to hear some of his organ solo. I think everyone had some double espresso shots before recording this tune.
Yeah.
Before getting back to another round of the melody, Magril and Riklis trade 8s and then 4s with Nehemia, keeping the energy high right to the end. Track 2 is called Twist and Turns. This is a fun one. Riklis gets the melody to start on organ. It's got a boppy riff line that keeps rising over stop time. It's kind of in an AABA shape with Magril taking over on the B, and then they join together on the final section that has an extra 2 measures to end it. To a nice start, so let's jump back in and hear some more of his guitar solo on this tune. Really nice agility, and I like how he mixes up the rhythms with triplet figures, double time, and other ideas too. Riklis follows from there with an organ solo, and the two do some trading 4s before another time through the melody. Track 3 is Nedi, and it's ballad time. Nehemia has the brushes working for some soft drumming. Here you can savor Magril's warm, rounded tone on the 32-measure melody that has a recurring motif. At this tempo, it takes about 2 minutes to get through the whole melody, so we'll just hear it get started. And let's hear a little bit of a more subtle side of Rickless on the organ with his solo. I'll join in about midway. Swell at the end, and a double time feel from there for a solo from Magril, and they downshift it again to wrap it up with the end of the melody. Track 4, Minor Blues, that's what it is. A cool alternating chord 8-measure intro before the 12-bar blues pattern. I like the little break going into the 5th measure of the melody and how it ends on the intro riff idea. After 2 rounds, it gets 4 more measures of the intro idea and a 2-measure break going into Magril's solo. Let's hear it. Playing. Let's hear a little bit more with a few more choruses of his solo. Is up next, and he pulls in a quote from If I Should Lose You in his solo. They return to the intro idea into another couple rounds of the melody and then vamp around for Nehemia to work up some energy on the drums to the end. Track 5 is another one for Wes. It's another minor melody with a great groove. I like Rickless's throbbing organ bass lines. The melody is 28 measures and has a nice harmonic twist after the repeating first 8-measure section. Magril is off on a solo from there. goes on with choruses of fresh ideas. Rickless follows with an exciting solo too, and then Nehemiah gets a drum solo, so let's check out him on this track. And once more around the melody to some final guitar flourishes to wrap things up. Track 6, Cool Breeze. It's ballad time again, and a chilled mood with this 24-measure melody. Let's hear it get started. Rickless takes a section of the melody midway through, and he also gets the first solo. Let's hear some of his playing on this tune. Left-hand ideas in there. Nehemiah traces out a double-time feel on the cymbals from Magril's animated solo, and he pulls it back for the final melody section, and Magril has some tasty lines at the end. Track 7, Africa. A rubato start with organ chords and drum fills. Nehemiah gets a straight 12/8 beat feel going, and Magril has some improvisations into the repeating 16-measure melody, and the groove switches to swing and back. Let's catch some of the end of the opening section into those changes a little bit into the tune. again. Magril and Rickless both get solos surfing the rhythmic change-ups on this one. After a final melody section, they vamp out with more ideas from Magril to a quietening ending. And the recording ends up with track 8, Friday, another slow tune that gets doubled up motion as it works into the solos. The melody is 16 measures of a repeating idea. Let's hear Magril's warm-toned lines. He also gets a lot of space for a solo on this tune, so let's jump in and hear some tasty double stops and how he wraps things up. And Rickless follows to a short final melody section and a stretched ending. And that's the recording. This should satisfy all guitar organ trio fans. Magril's program of all original compositions echo past jazz classics, but have unique twists to surprise you. There's enough variety with ballads, blues, high-energy swinging, and some straight beat feel mixed in. His guitar tone is warm and can get a biting edge in articulation to emphasize an idea. He's adventurous with improvised ideas, especially rhythmically, with lines that burst out with a lot of spontaneous feel. Rickless matches well with groovy bass lines, interesting solo ideas, and touches of shimmering tone in just the right spots. And Nehemiah handles all the changing grooves and feels seamlessly, and he has a few spots to shine out on solos. Everything is in the post-bop pocket, but it comes out freshly pressed.
Yeah, this is a groovy, feel-good album. The band brings the grooves and an enthusiastic liveliness to the performances. I would have liked to have heard them take more chances in the solos, actually, and not use so much figuration and repeating patterns. There were a lot of those kind of, repeating patterns. I just wanted to hear them stretch out a bit more. But the mood was always there. I like Magril's tone, and he sounds great when he's relying on that when playing and shaping themes. Nettie particularly comes across with a nice glow to it, as did the album's other ballad, Cool Breeze. This is a light, enjoyable listen, good for a groovy evening.
Yeah, you can never get enough of the Hammond organ and in the guitar trio. It's like the perfect format to hear all those good sounds.
Oh yeah, it really is.
All right, next we're going to go to the USA and take a trip down south, Mike.
All right. I like the South.
And that's the title of the recording, South, on Sunnyside Records by saxophonists Randal Despommier. It came out March 7th. Randal Despommier is a New Orleans native alto saxophonist. He studied early sacred music in Italy, earned a doctorate at New England Conservatory, played the organ, and led choirs in churches. His previous recordings include 2018's All at Onceness with pianist Jason Yeager, who we'll hear on this recording. His solo debut was in 2021 with Dio C'è, And he followed that with A Midsummer Odyssey with guitarist Ben Monder in 2022, also on Sunnyside Records. He's also an educator, having directed the music program at Bard High School Early College in Manhattan, taught jazz history with the Bard College Prison Initiative, and he teaches music theory at 3rd Street Music Settlement and lives in New York City now. From the Bandcamp notes, the music of New Orleans has a distinct sound and sensibility, like an accent, Despommier explains. You can hear it in the way Jelly Roll Morton bends those blue notes when he sang, "I Thought I Heard Buddy Bolden Say." That sound intoxicated me as a kid, and it still does, no matter the different musical paths I've taken over the years with classical music and ethnomusicology. I grew up hearing the funky street beats in New Orleans, and they're still very much the rhythm of the city. It's easy to love because it's a festive, celebratory sound, a music that pulls people in and brings them together. And I think you'll find that spirit will surely come through in this recording. So we've got Randal Despommier on alto sax. There's 2 rhythm sections that are split here among the tunes. One is built around the New Orleans-based musicians David Torkanowski, James Singleton, and Johnny Vidakovich, and then his regular New York quintet musicians. So I'll mention them as they go along, but as the tunes go out, Jason Yeager on piano, tracks 3, 6, and 8, David Torkanowski on piano, tracks 1, 2, 5, 7, and 9, Aaron Holthus on bass, tracks 3, 4, 6, and 8, and James Singleton on bass, tracks 1, 2, 5, 7, and 9, and Rodrigo Recaberon on drums, tracks 3, 4, 6, and 8, Johnny Vidakovich on drums, tracks 1, 2, 5, and 7, and Phil Despommier, his father, on drums as a guest on track 9. The recording is going to start out with an old Professor Longhair tune, Go to the Mardi Gras. It was first recorded in 1949. This one will put you in a good mood right away with a New Orleans drum beat from Vidakovich. Torkanowski has an introductory piano line that's like Professor Longhair's in the original, and then Despommier is in with the 12-bar blues melody. Let's hear it.
Okay, David got this. I'll go to the Mardi Gras, David Torkanowski.
He's off on a solo from there. On this tune, let's check out Torkanowski's piano solo. Yeah, great funky stuff. Singleton follows with an impactful bass solo with cool double stops, and Vidakovich gets a drum solo too, before the piano brings Despommier back for a final raucous sax melody section. Track 2 is Alan Toussaint's Southern Nights from Toussaint's 1975 album of the same name. His original version had a dreamy quality to it and a kind of underwater-sounding vocal. Now, if you're a Gen X like us, you probably had Glenn Campbell's 1976 countrified version of it burned into your brain from AM radio in the 1970s. Here they give it a kind of synthy and dreamy intro with reverby sax coming in. Let's hear that intro section first. Despommier starts with the rhythmic riff idea from the original to work into a lovely phrasing of the melody with really great answering bass lines from Singleton. Let's hear some more of this. As it goes on, he sticks close to the melody with tasty embellishments, and Tokanowski has a subtle ringing piano solo working to the riff idea again. Despommier returns for more melody into a soft and dreamy ending. Be sure to check it all out. Track 3 is a Despommier original, Round 3 a.m., a blues nocturne. And in the notes, he says, "It's my blending of the blues and the nocturne. The key of my piece is F minor, a nod to the first Chopin piece I learned on the piano, the Nocturne in F minor, Opus 55, number 1. It's a waltz here with a 16-measure intro of ringing bass notes and soft high-register piano lines. Despommier comes in on the melody, which takes a while to unfold. His soft tone in the high register kind of reminds you of Paul Desmond, but it really fills out in the lower register for an interesting contrast. Let's hear it get started. Lovely tone. Let's come back in and hear some of his improvisations as well. That's Jason Yeager on piano on this one, and he's next with a solo, skillfully mixing classical nocturne feel with bluesy touches. He resets the feel with a solo piano chord section that works into a new bass ostinato from Aaron Holtis, and Despommier's return with more impassioned improvisations. Holtis has a bass solo with fat, ringing tone, and they work to a final section where the tempo falls away over bowed bass and piano lines, like in the beginning, rise up to end it. Track 4, Si tu vois ma mère. This is, I guess, If You See My Mother, a tune by Sidney Bechet, the great New Orleans clarinetist, and also really the first soprano saxophonist in jazz. He really made that instrument part of jazz. This was first recorded in 1952. Despommier's tone is great on this melody, starting out just over Holtis's bass and getting joined by Rodrigo Recabarren on drums. Let's hear it. Holtis has a nicely relaxed lumping bass solo here, and Despommier is back with a final melody section and an ending we should really check out. Yeah, great control and nice tone way up high there. Track 5, a Despommier original, Jelly Roll's Living Room. Tokanowski's piano sets the stage with the intro of this one. At this relaxed tempo, it's hard to get much of the melody in a minute sample. I'll pick up from the repeat of the A section into Despommier's entrance on the B section a little bit into the tune. Nice feel. Let's check out Tokanowski's piano solo on this one. Despommier is back from the B section again to take it to the end. Track 6, Charles Mingus's Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, his tribute to the great saxophonist Lester Young. This was first recorded in 1959 for his recording. All jazz fans will know this melody. It starts out here as an interesting synced-up harmonized duet between Despommier and Holthus. Jaeger and Recobaron join in from there with subtle backing. It moves on in a controlled fashion, with Despommier adding improvisations in the final section before the ending. Track 7, Dying to Live, by multi-instrumentalist piano, sax, and vocalist Edgar Winter. This is from his 1971 recording Edgar Winter's White Trash.
Wow.
The original features Winter's heartfelt, soulful vocals. It's an interesting choice, and Despommier captures that feel nicely here with Torkanowski's piano as well. Let's hear it get started. Let's come back for some soulful sax improvisations. Track 8 is another Despommier original, Blues Rheumatica. This is slow and has a delirious mood, kind of like being woken mid-dream. It starts with just Jaeger's piano and Despommier. Let's check it out. moves on in similar fashion and works to pauses and an unwinding music box-like ending from Jaeger. And the recording ends up with track 9, Just a Closer Walk with Thee, a traditional gospel song from the American South and, as the notes tell us, a New Orleans jazz funeral standard. Phil Despommier, Randal's father, is on drums on this one. The notes say that the musicians coaxed him into it after not having played for a while. Torkanowski makes a stately piano intro to bring Despommier in on the melody, and that drum beat sounds just right to me here. Nice and slow. Torkanowski has a blues-drenched solo with great tremolos here, but let's hear one more sax solo from Despommier on this final tune. It works to a slowed, gospel-y ending of the tune and the album. As much as jazz is an international music now, and we hear great recordings from around the world every week, it's nice to hear something that is rooted in a firm sense of place. This recording oozes New Orleans hot sauce and leaves that flavor in your ears. On the other hand, there's a lot of variety in the program too, stretching from Mingus, Edgar Winter, and to Despommier's unique originals. Other than the New Orleans flavor, what stands out throughout the recording is Despommier's great alto sax tone and musical way of phrasing ideas. You feel drawn into his lines. Vidakovich, Singleton, and Torkanowski bring New Orleans authenticity to the music, and standout solos from Torkanowski and both Singleton and Holtis's basses add a lot to the recording. Why not take a trip down south?
Down south to New Orleans, where jazz really began. Yeah. It's a pretty clear-cut history. There's a bit of a jazz history lesson here for that reason, and I really love New Orleans jazz. It's really special. All of the tunes on this album just have that authentic sort of rootsy sort of sound to them, too. Despommier and friends carry over the dust of the years along with the tunes, making for a very satisfying and even nostalgic listen. The playing is full of character, and the solos all have soulful content. There are a lot of musicians changing places throughout the album, with Despommier the only constant, really, yet everyone has absorbed the idiom well. It's good to hear music with the deep blues and gospel feeling most of these tracks have. A satisfying listen. I really loved this album.
I really like the character of everything. It's great.
Yeah.
All right, one more. Something in contrast to what we've heard so far. A recording called Moving Parts by Kaisa's Machine. This is on Greenleaf Music, Dave Douglas's label, and it came out March 14th. Kaisa Mainsivu is a Finnish jazz bassist, composer, and bandleader. She started playing piano at age 6, but after seeing a woman play double bass on television, she was inspired to take up the instrument. She studied jazz at the Sibelius Academy in Helsinki and received a master's degree from the Manhattan School of Music in 2017. She's released 4 albums under her own name and appeared on many others as well. And this is her working group now, The Machine, which includes Kaisa Mayan Sivu on bass and all original compositions, Sasha Berliner on vibraphone, Max Light on guitar, Eden Ledeen on piano, Joe Perry on drums, and we've got a couple guests, Melissa Aldana on sax on one track, and Maya Manila on vocals. She's a Finnish singer and pianist. All compositions, as I mentioned, are originals by Kaisa Mayan Sivu. Executive producer is Dave Douglas, and producer is Kaisa Mayan Sivu. This was recorded on June 30th and July 1st, 2024 at Big Orange Sheep in Brooklyn, New York. Recording engineer Alain Benjamini, assistant recording engineers Brenna Campbell and Kevin Thomas, mix engineer Matthias Kiveri, and mastering engineer Alain Benjamini. The recording is going to get underway with a tune called Tykytys. Tykytys. I think in Finnish this means something like pulsation or heartbeat. There's a lot going on rhythmically in this tune, and throughout the whole album, as you'll hear. Ledin gets it started with an 8-measure intro of piano chords that have a skipping rhythmic feel in 4. That goes around again, getting some heavy drum action from Peri and pulsing bass from Mayan Sivu. That idea alternates with unison melodic line sections from Berliner and Light on guitar and vibes that have a contrasting slow loping waltz feel. Let's check this out. Comes to a reset with the skipping piano and bass and a drum build-up into a guitar solo from Light, showing off a thick reverby tone over the shifting rhythmic feels. Let's hear some of his playing on this tune. The final section of the tune is like the opening split personality idea with vibes and guitar, and it works to a chilled-out repeated phrase ending. An interesting tune and a real workout for Peri, generating a lot of drum energy. Track 2 is Midnight Sun. Ledeen has another unique rhythmic piano intro to this tune, and then Mayan Sivu takes center stage with a bass melody. The first section is 16 measures with cool snappy rhythms and clear articulation, nice subtle backing from guitar and vibes. It goes around again with Berliner doubling the melody on vibes and light working in too. Insistent rhythmic piano chords come in and push it to a new melody section of vibes and guitar over pulsing bass and busy drums, and then a return to the earlier line on bass, guitar, and vibes. Mayan and Berliner trade improvisations on this one, so let's hear a little bit of that exchange. Returns to the vibes and guitar and tripled up melody that we heard before, and then changes up to a 3-beat feel for a piano solo from Ladine in the final section that gets built up by the others with lines at the end. A lot of interesting developments over the course of this tune. Track 3 is Origin Story. Melissa Aldana joins in on this one, taking the melody with Light's guitar. But first, check out the really complex rhythmic bass that Mayan starts it out with, and the tight groove that results when Peri joins in on drums. Interesting harmonic shift there. Aldana's up first for a solo, and the rhythmic drive dissipates into a slow 3-beat feel. Let's hear her get started here. Sivo starts really digging in on the bass below. There's a new section with unison guitar and bass lines and rhythmic vibe figures, and that works to a melody line of guitar, sax, and vibes. Sivo restarts the opening bass figure into a final melody section of sax and guitar lines. Track 4 is Moon Waves. Here Sivo gets this one started with a neat pulsing 6-beat bass intro before a vibes and guitar melody line starts snaking through. The timing of the phrases is tricky, and as it goes along, there's a lot of space between the phrases. Sivo has a bass solo on this tune, so let's check this out. Guitar and vibe lines transition to a guitar solo from Light with really well-connected lines, and the tune comes to an ending with vibes and guitar lines into soft piano. Track 5, Who's Asking? This has a cute, bouncy bass and vibes unison melody that gets going. Things change up with vibes and guitar joining together against bass and piano that have another idea going. Bass works to another section with the overlaid parts. Vibes and guitar come back and continue on with more lines to a piano solo from Ladine. So let's hear some of his playing on this tune. After the piano solo, the bass and vibes lines from the beginning are back, with Perry filling in around the drum kit, and then guitar and vibe lines take it to a rising line ending. Track 6, Satama, in parentheses harbor, well, I guess that's what it means in Finnish. This starts with a neat bass line in 7/4 that has cool harmonics in it. The vibes come in, giving it a dreamy atmosphere, and Maya Manila is on vocals here with Finnish lyrics. Vocal quality there. And Manila works to some scat singing as well, so let's check out a little bit of that. There's a final verse there and some final vocalizations to the end. And the recording ends up on track 7, Best Kept Secrets. Vibe and guitar lines start with drum fills, bass enters and joins the lines, and bass and muted guitar work a tricky line that grooves with drums until piano enters with a new idea that is doubled by guitar. Let's hear this one get started. Berliner gets her moment for a vibes solo on this tune, so let's check out her playing. Mayan Sivu gets a bass solo on this tune here as well, while also joining in the backing lines from guitar and vibes at the same time. It sounds really tricky. And the ending section has shifting interplay between vibes, guitar, and bass. What stands out most to me on this recording is the unique instrumentation and arranging and the focus on intricate and tricky rhythms throughout. Vibes and guitar often work lines together to an interesting effect. Mayan Sivu's bass is warm-toned, and she impresses with rhythmic ideas, whether making grooves or improvising solo lines. The recording is short at just 39 minutes, but took a lot of my concentration to focus on the development and continuously unfolding original compositions. Joe Perry's drumming is impressive, handling all the changing rhythmic ideas and working up a lot of energy in spots. Intense guitar solos from Max Light and fine piano work and solos from Eden Ladine. I enjoyed Sasha Berliner's vibes concept, and her and Ladine do a good job of not getting in each other's soundscape, which can happen with piano and vibes together on a recording. Melissa Aldana's sax and guest vocals from Maya Manila give the program a wider scope, and everything comes out sounding fresh and quite unique.
The surprise here for me was Kaisa Mayansiyu's bass playing. She plays with a lot of character, getting interesting twists and tones into her lines, and really drawing the listener. She's interesting in her solos, as well as when she surprisingly has the theme. Sasha Berliner on vibes provides a bit of enchantment with her beguiling ringing tone, and Max Light has an uplifting solo in Moon Waves. I also thought Melissa Aldana's guest appearance on track 3, Origin Story, had an appealing, smoldering feeling to it. The whole album has a light feeling, but it's pretty complicated, as you said, and the timbral combinations and surprising changes of rhythm on some tracks make it sonically and musically appealing throughout. Really something to listen for. It's well recorded as well, with the bass forward, the way I like it, but that's as it should be, with the bassist as a leader. This was an enjoyable record.
You know, we've heard a lot of interesting recordings made by great musicians from Finland, and I think Finnish jazz needs some more recognition. I guess if players come to New York and get in the big mix of things there, maybe they'll get some more recognition for some of the other players that aren't known in the U.S. yet. But I'm all for hearing more Finnish jazz because it's always got a little bit of a unique twist on things.
It's really funny how jazz is still sort of like city related. Like you have to go to New York or things like that. It seems like it should be more universal, like we should all be listening to each other.
Yeah, well, that's why we're here. So get some of these
we're trying to change
recordings from around the world. Listen to Around the World. And I've got some more international releases for next week. But before that, what's on the classical menu for next week, Mike?
Well, we have more Vivaldi and more Four Seasons. You may wonder why, but that's because we have a recording of the entirety of Opus 8. This is Volume 1. This is La Serenissima, friends of the podcast. They've written, some nice things to us a few times. And I thought we needed to do this because they were kind of known for this work. They recorded a pretty famous version of it about 10 years ago. And now they're doing the entire Opus 8. And as I mentioned, it's the 300th anniversary of those 12 concertos. So we're going to hear the Four Seasons plus the other 8 concertos. This is Volume 1. And then we're going to hear Volume 2 later in the year, which won't have any of the Four Seasons concertos on it. But I think it's kind of important for people to listen to those other concertos as well. We have a symphony by Emil Mlynarski. He's Polish. This is his symphony in F major, Opus 14 Polonia, and I don't really know much about it. I'm curious to find out about it. And as I mentioned, it's the 100th anniversary of Pierre Boulez, and there's a recording of his Livre pour Quatuor, which he never finished, apparently, by Quatuor Diotima, who actually studied with him. So I'm really curious to hear that. It's going to be a challenging listen, but we need to give Boulez a nod during his anniversary year as well.
Okay, sounds interesting. I'm up for a challenge. After Vivaldi, that'll be light and easy.
Well, that's the idea, light and, heavy, kind of.
On the jazz side, we're going to start out in Europe with a Franco-Swiss quartet. The leader is the bassist Antoine Brochet, and it's called Because It's Only Right. That's on Jazz Family. Then we're going to go to Italy for some bass clarinet from Matteo Pastorino. It's called Light Side on AMA Records. I'm really looking forward to listening to that. I've checked it out a little bit.
Bass clarinet, all right. I'm looking forward to it myself.
And then we'll come back to the good old USA with one of our favorite record labels, Origin, and pianist Dave Hansen's new recording, Blues Sky. All 3 of those recordings came out on March 21st, so freshly squeezed. and looking forward to having deep listens of them through the week. Thanks as always to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. All of those recordings that we just mentioned will be up in our playlist on Deezer, and we'll have a link to them as well from our Facebook page if you want to get started listening early in the week as we are. That'll be up a few hours after this episode is published. Any final thoughts, Mike, from your new abode?
Yeah, I think the new podcasting station here has acquitted itself well, and I think I'm going to keep it the way it is.
Oh, all right. Sounds good. But I did enjoy doing the same room version last week.
That was fun, too. Yeah, we'll have to do more of those. Yeah, I'm always up for that. They work really well, too, and we can actually see each other. And well, we can see each other now, but it's not the same as being in the same room as each other.
All right, that's going to wrap things up for episode 205, and we're looking forward to coming back with episode 206 next week. So until then, keep listening, have a good week, and we'll see you again right here next time.